Next up, we have Representative Morales' bill, which is House Bill 5442, which would impose a moratorium on the termination of utility services throughout a limited period of any emergency declared by the governor, with special provisions related to emergencies related to health epidemics. Representative Morales.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. And I want to just thank you all again for the opportunity to discuss and consider House Bill 5442. In summary, this bill would prohibit utility suppliers from terminating one's utility services, such as electricity, gas, and water throughout the COVID-19 pandemic, and any future declared emergencies issued by the governor related to the provisions of Chapter 15 of Title 30. Since last March, we have all been affected by the COVID-19 pandemic, with some communities feeling the impact a lot more than others. From falling ill to having your hours reduced at work to losing your job altogether, it has been the working people in our state who have suffered the most throughout this pandemic, both health-wise and economically. This is evident as 1 in 4 Rhode Island families were food insecure this past winter. More than 230,000 people have collectively filed for unemployment, dozens of small businesses have been forced to shut down, and over 100,000 people in our state have been infected with COVID. Therefore, it is necessary we pass this bill in order to ensure that during these unprecedented times, no one has to suffer from a lack of essential utilities just because they are unable to afford their expensive utility bills. After all, utilities in Rhode Island are not affordable, as we have the 3rd highest electricity costs in the country and the 4th highest natural gas costs. Just this past October, National Grid's proposal to increase electricity rates was approved, resulting in the average consumer's electricity bill to increase by $10.78 again during a pandemic. As we all know, after nearly a year of COVID-19, we are constantly reminded about how important utilities are to our everyday lives. We use electricity to cook, to light our homes, access the internet, go to work remotely, and if you have children, then they're using the computer for distance learning. It is evident utilities are basic essentials for survival during these times, and it is crucial that no one has their utilities shut off because of their inability to pay. Now, I want to be clear. This bill does not mean free utilities. People are still expected to pay their utility bills, and if they do not, it accumulates into debt that they owe to National Grid or other service providers. This bill makes it simply so someone who cannot afford their monthly payments due to economic distress does not have to fear the termination of their utility services. The bill would also provide a moratorium on utility shutoffs 90 days following the end of any declared emergency that is related to public health, such as COVID-19. This is an important component of the bill, as economic research has determined that following the mass distribution of the COVID-19 vaccine, it will take between 1 to 2 years for our local and national economy to return to normal. Now, before I close, I do want to address the slippery slope argument that there might be people who take advantage of this program or this moratorium. But as previously mentioned, people will still find themselves in serious debt if they do not pay their bills, and that debt will follow them. Most importantly, however, remember, we are in a deadly pandemic that has claimed over 2,000 lives in our state and has disrupted the economic status of thousands of working families. Therefore, these decisions that we make as a state are so important because together we have the opportunity to help working people survive and get on a path to recovery following COVID-19. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony, Representative. Are there any questions for the sponsor? Seeing none? Representative Potter?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Representative Morales. Very important subject. As I'm listening to you talk, I'm thinking of the ongoing crisis down in Texas. And to imagine how much utility shutoffs would exacerbate the effect of COVID-19 here locally is really unconscionable. I wonder, are any other states right now offering any type of moratorium program that we can cite?
Yes, 8 states currently have a moratorium in place throughout the COVID-19 pandemic, such as New York, Vermont, New Jersey, and Virginia. New York's has been the most comprehensive, as it lasts an additional 180 days following the end of their state's declared emergency.
Okay, thank you. And currently, is there any protection available for people locally here in Rhode Island? Is there anything preventing National Grid or any utility carrier from shutting off service?
Yes, so each year we have a winter moratorium for low-income customers who are in good standing with National Grid between the months of November and April. In my conversations with advocates, it is uncertain, and I have heard at times unlikely that the moratorium will be extended by the Public Utilities Commission, which is why it is so important that we pass this bill.
Thank you, Representative. Those 8 states that you speak of with the moratorium, did they do that by executive order, or is that by legislation?
Some of them have done it through executive order, others have done it through legislation, and I also think that it is worth mentioning that several other states have chosen to do it at the local level because of the fact that they have several utility service providers, as opposed to here in Rhode Island where we have a monopoly with National Grid.
Representative, if you could provide a copy of the legislation from those states that did it legislatively, if in your travels, I'd like to take a look at that, just
Yes.
to compare and see how other states did it legislatively.
Be more than happy to.
Representative Fenton Fung.
Yeah, I was just about to go there with that, Chairman, too. The other concern, I mean, this extends to so many communities, and I think of the seniors right now who are being stretched beyond imagination right now. I would be interesting to see if with all those different states that you're able to grab, whether or not that 90 days is consistent. I know you cited New York, that was 180. I don't know if any are less than that or whatnot, because again, when does this end per se? And, are they saying from the end of the executive order of, the state of emergency? Like, it would be very interesting to see, just to keep the window as narrow as possible, to be fair, while still being effective. So
Yeah,
I look forward to that.
Thank you for asking that. So most states do it until the emergency order has been lifted by the respective governor.
Thank you. Whip Chippendale.
Thank you, Chairman. Rep, did you have the opportunity to speak with PUC on this and get their feedback?
Yes, I spoke with them on Friday, and they discussed a change to the language, which I would be more than happy to speak with the committee about if a sub-A is necessary.
But they weren't cold to it? They were warm to the idea?
No, yeah, they were definitely not opposed to it.
Okay, great. Thank you.
So the language that you do have recommended, if you could provide a copy to the clerk and to council as well as the committee, we'd be interested in taking a look at it, if there's sub-A language.
Yes, there is some sub-A language, be more than happy to forward it, and most importantly, it does not change the purpose of the bill by any means.
Okay, thank you. Are there any additional questions for the sponsor? Hearing none, thank you for your testimony. We have 18 witnesses signed up to provide verbal testimony in favor of this bill. So I would ask that the 18 witnesses, if you agree with the purpose of the bill, it's very helpful if you just, be very specific to the point that you agree to the bill, and if there's something more that you'd like to add to it, that it's not before the committee, we will hear it. But I would ask that if you could just limit your testimony to 2 minutes on this each. So first up, we will take up Spencer Laubel. Spencer, you are before the House Committee on Corporations.
Hi, thank you so much for allowing people to speak to this issue. I am very much in favor of this bill, it's House Bill 5442, to prevent utility shutoffs during the COVID-19 crisis. I'm currently disabled. I've been I've been trying to apply for SSDI since January of 2020, and I'm currently very behind on my utilities as a result. I lost my father when I was 17. My mother is also disabled. She got diagnosed with COVID as well as cancer last year, and my family just doesn't have the means in order to help me out of this rut that I'm in. And if I get my utilities shut off, I'm going to be homeless, and I'm going to have to give up my emotional support dog, and it's just going to be absolutely horrible for my mental health and my health in general, as well as my family's well-being. So I just really wanted to illustrate and accentuate that this is really important for residents in Rhode Island, because a lot of us are not only in my position where we're waiting on a disability hearing because of COVID having extended all of the wait times, but other people who just are having a rough time making ends meet, who have lost their jobs, who no longer are getting the additional hazard pay from companies like Whole Foods and Amazon. And there's also things that have gone on where people have lost other jobs as well, like Uber. You know, they've lost a lot of income because they can only take so many people per ride now, and it really does put a strain on every single person in this state. And so if we can just make sure that we can keep our lights on, it would be more than an amazing help, and a relief to many of us who are just trying to survive this pandemic with the little means that we have.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Are there any questions for the witness? Brandon Potter, Representative Potter?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Not a question, but Spencer, I just wanted to thank you for such heartfelt testimony. Sharing your personal experiences, really powerful and not lost on us. So thank you for sharing that.
I appreciate it. Thank you for listening.
Yep, thank you very much for your testimony, Spencer. Next up, we will take up Camille Shea. Camille, you are before the House Committee on Corporations. You may proceed.
Hello, my name is Camille Shea, and I have been working, and I'd like to testify in support of House Bill number 5442. I have been working as a direct support staff professional for individuals with disabilities in the state of Rhode Island for the past, since 2017, actually. And this is my first time testifying for a bill, actually, and I'm testifying because I can only imagine the effects of I can only imagine what would happen if an individual with disabilities had their utilities cut off at this point in time in the pandemic. In my experience with individuals, folks have ventilators, folks rely upon having charged phones in order to receive emergency services if they are experiencing a seizure, and I can only imagine the health effects upon someone who does not have disabilities. And I'm sorry, I'm emotional about this because this would be devastating for an individual that has disabilities in my experience, and I would hate for someone to become severely ill or even die due to potentially having their utilities cut off. And I say that, and it may sound hyperbolic, but it is truly no joke, and as someone who has worked with individuals, I would hate for folks with disabilities to not be considered or taken into account with this particular bill. Not to imply that that that's not the case, but or that they would not, but I just wanted to make sure that that folks that are nonverbal or folks that might not be able to voice their opinions or voice their need for these utilities to be able to be heard by this committee. Thank you.
Camille, thank you so much for your heartfelt testimony on this. Are there any questions for the witness? Hearing none. Thank you, Camille. Next up, we will take up Miguel Sanchez. Miguel, you are before the House Committee on Corporations. You may proceed.
Hello, my name is Miguel Sanchez. I'm here to give us support of Bill 5442 as a Providence resident and community advocate. Hello?
Yep, we can hear you. You may proceed.
Okay, COVID-19 has been horrendous to working class folks across the country. A lot of people have lost their employment due to COVID-19. The last thing that working class folks need to worry about is being able to pay their light or water bill being shut off because they don't have the means to pay for it during this crisis. Just the other day, I spoke to my elderly neighbor who had to decide whether to pay for the water bill or pay for health coverage for the upcoming month. That's the type of decisions folks here in Rhode Island are having to make right now. If we allow for utility companies to shut off services due to non-payment during this crisis, more lives will be lost at the hands of COVID-19. During times of crisis, we must provide support to our most vulnerable. This is why a moratorium on utility shutoff is very important. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Are there any questions for the witness? Hearing none? Thank you. Next up, we have Tim Fisher. Tim, you're before the House Committee on Corporations. You may proceed.
Hi, my name is Andrew Pointer. I'm a resident of Providence. I'm calling to voice my support for Bill 5442. I think that with everything going on between the public health issue, the public health crisis with COVID-19, as well as the economic crisis that has happened with COVID-19, we should do everything we can to try to support Rhode Islanders, and we should not be shutting off utilities. One of the key things that helps keep people safe and prevent the spread of COVID is washing hands, and people can't wash hands if their water is turned off. So, we shouldn't be turning off people's water in the middle of a pandemic. In addition to that, it is the middle of winter, and turning off heat on someone could be, could end up killing them. We ended up, luckily, our power went out for one night a few weeks ago in our neighborhood, and our whole neighborhood, the power went out. And it got pretty cold. The kids ended up waking up, but luckily it didn't get that cold. It was only for about 7 hours that it went out. But, if we're shutting off people's power in the middle of winter and in the middle of a pandemic, we shouldn't be doing that. So I'm just calling to voice my support, and hope that if this gets voted out of committee and to the floor of the House of Representatives.
Thank you so much for your testimony, Andrew. Are there any questions for the witness? Hearing none? Thank you, Andrew. I would ask the clerk, I believe we skipped over Tim Fisher. If he's still, if Tim Fisher. Tim, you are before the House Committee on Corporations. You may proceed.
Hi, thank you. I'm an MSW student, and I work with people experiencing homelessness. I have for the last few years, and I think someone spoke earlier about this, but there's definitely a connection between people falling behind on their bills and having to make those decisions. I work with tons of people who have back due bills, and whose shut-off really contributed to them experiencing homelessness, especially families, because, if you are seen as not being able to provide basic needs, it can, really affect you. So I just wanted to voice my support to pass this bill, and super important, and I appreciate everyone's testimony today. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony, Tim. Are there any questions for the witness? Hearing none. Thank you. Next up, we have Dhruv Gaur. So Dhruv Gaur is not available, but he did sign up in favor. Tom Hendrickson, you are before the House Committee on Corporations. You may proceed.
Thank you. My name is Tom Hendrickson. I'm currently a student at Providence College and the vice president of the Providence College Democratic Socialists. I'm speaking tonight in support of House Bill 5442. As a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, many people in our community, through no fault of their own, have been experiencing newfound financial struggles and have had to make difficult choices about which bills they can and cannot afford to pay. To shut off someone's utilities and to take away something that is a basic human necessity because of financial hardship that people have no control over is to kick someone when they're already down. It's unnecessary and cruel. Many people are now working from home remotely because of the pandemic, and to shut off their electricity is to shut off their livelihood, making matters even worse and even more difficult for people who are already struggling. People rely on electricity to stay warm during the winter. They rely on electricity to cook, to send their kids to remote school, and for many other necessary basic activities. To take away someone's utilities during these pandemic conditions is horribly cruel, and the Providence College DSA stands for equity and justice, and as such, we strongly encourage members of the committee to support HB 5442. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Is there any question for the witness? Hearing none. Next up, we have Michael Kearney. Michael, you're before the House Committee on Corporations. You may proceed.
Thank you. So my name is Michael Kearney, and I live on South Main Street in Providence, and my elected officials are Rep. Lazewski and Senator Golden. And I'm calling to testify in support of House Bill 5442 to stop utility shutoffs for non-payment during public emergencies. So based on our last month's energy usage and the recent winter weather, we expect our utility bill this month to be between $300 and $400. And luckily my roommate and I can afford that, but I don't know what we'd do if we couldn't pay it and we got shut off for that, like given the ongoing pandemic. I wouldn't want to stay with a friend and risk spreading COVID to them. I don't think we could stay inside the apartment with it being freezing outside, unable to use the stove or the lights or the microwave or the toaster. No one should have to live in the dark or without heat ever, period. But especially during a pandemic and during any future potential emergencies, we have to make sure that no one in our state gets shut off for non-payment. As we're seeing in Texas right now, unregulated utility companies will take advantage of both people and government during crises to line their own pockets, charging thousands of dollars with literally deadly consequences. I know that this bill won't address potential capacity issues during emergencies, but it's the House's opportunity to protect Rhode Islanders from shutoffs for non-payment. We saw, especially at the beginning of this pandemic, how hard it was for the General Assembly to meet because of the virus. No one saw the pandemic coming at all until it was already here. It's essential that the House act now in anticipation of future emergencies, whether it's a pandemic or extreme weather events or something else that we can't even imagine yet. This is the House's chance to pass Bill 5442 and protect Rhode Islanders now and in the future before it's too late. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Are there any questions for the witness? Hearing none. Thank you. Next up, we have Brittany Palumbo.
Do last outs with him?
Brittany, you're before the House. Oh, I'm sorry. It's Nina. You are before the House Committee on Corporations. You may proceed.
Hello, thank you so much. My name is Nina Wolf-Landau, and I am here to testify as a food service worker, someone who works on food policy, an activist with Sunrise Providence, and most importantly, as a resident of Providence in support of House Bill 5442. The COVID pandemic, as all of you know, has decimated the economy across the United States and here in Rhode Island. We know that thousands of Rhode Islanders have lost their jobs and as a result are facing economic instability. And we also know that thousands of Rhode Islanders every year are already struggling to pay their utility bills. We know that this bill will ensure that the victims of this misfortune will not have to worry about having their vital utility services cut off due to a lack of payment during our declared health emergency and for 90 days following the end of that emergency. Amidst this pandemic, we know families are making hard choices to afford rent, utility bills, food, and other necessities. And we also know that National Grid, a massive corporation, continues to profit and even passed 3 rate increases approved by the Public Utilities Commission during this pandemic. To not pass this moratorium would be to sit idly by while National Grid continues to profit and Rhode Islanders face devastating conditions. We know that utility shutoffs are also devastating for Rhode Islanders' health, from increased risk for pneumonia, flu, bronchitis, colds, heat stroke, hypothermia, and the list goes on. So I really urge each and every one of you to support this legislation and to really do the right thing for the people across Rhode Island.
Thank you, Nina, for your testimony. Are there any questions for the witness? Hearing none. Thank you. Next up, actually, I just want to pause for a moment. Representative Morales, if I could just ask you a question, if you're still available. Representative, all this testimony, I just find it really interesting, and, obviously we don't want to see anybody being shut off. I would just ask, it's my understanding that when a public utility shuts off the utility to someone, that there is some type of reporting to the PUC. So I'd ask maybe if you could follow up with the PUC and try to get some statistics as to how many people have been shut off, I don't know, say over the past 6 months or...
Yeah, I would love to gather data on how many people's utilities have been shut off as of March of 2020. Yes.
I'm sorry, what's up?
I'd be more than happy to gather data as to how many people have had their utilities shut off since March of 2020.
That would be great. That would be great to hear. I really appreciate it. Thank you. Next up, we have Aaron Isaac. Aaron, you're before the House Committee on Corporations. You may proceed.
Thank you. My name is Aaron. I am from West Warwick, Rhode Island, and I am advocating for the bill. I wanted to highlight some of the research that's been done on issues like this and why I think it's important. I'll keep my comments brief. First, if we don't pass this bill or a bill like it, we're risking another spike in COVID cases. People who tend to be, who will be afraid their utilities will be shut off, will look to families and friends for water and electricity. In so doing, they're going to be violating social distancing recommendations. Second, we're risking a slower economic recovery. People tend to make riskier financial decisions at a cost in the long term. I want to end on this. According to National Grid, 80% of people have managed to pay their utility bills, but that does not mean they're not struggling. And yes, only 20% of people are not up to date with their payments, but that does not mean they are insignificant. And it does not mean we can ignore them. We hope and we think that this pandemic is on its last legs, but it's not over, and we can't become complacent. So, thank you.
Thank you, Aaron. You raised some really interesting points that 20% are not up to date, and obviously you could be facing some issues with this. So it's something we definitely need to follow up with. Vice Chair Caldwell.
Thank you for that testimony. You also reminded us of something that Representative Potter brought up in his comments, that really right now our neighbors' health is also our health and our whole community's health. So this is a time where we should really be advocating for taking care of each other and taking care of the folks in our community, and I think that this bill is really a great start to that. So thank you for reminding us all of that tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the witness? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Next up, we have Jordan Goyatt. Jordan, you're before the House Committee on Corporations. You may proceed.
Thank you, Chairman Solomon, and to members of the committee. I wanted to urge your strong support for Rep. Morales' Bill H. 5442, which would enact a moratorium on utility shutoffs. And as the rep stated before, even COVID hit, how utility cost in Rhode Island was a large burden on a lot of people. And immediately when this crisis struck and the ensuing economic woes hit, people started losing their jobs, had trouble filing for unemployment. Falling behind on the utility costs was a big worry, and I just think that nobody at no fault of their own should have their lights stop working, their heat stop blowing, or their water stop running in the middle of a pandemic. As it's already said, it's in no best interest as we're trying to climb out of this pandemic to have people without clean water runner in their homes or have in cold, wet homes. So I hope you strongly and swiftly consider this bill, because it is something you can do right now that will have a immediate, that will lift a very large weight off of a lot of people's backs. So thank you, and I'd be happy to take any questions if you have any.
Thank you for your testimony. Are there any questions for the witness? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Next up, we have David Valise. David, you may proceed with your testimony.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chairperson and the committee, and thank you to Representative Morales for introducing this bill. My name is David Valise. I'm the director and lead organizer for the Rhode Island Interfaith Coalition to Reduce Poverty. We are supporting this bill because we believe that we have a moral imperative to lift people out of poverty and to help people in the time of need. And as many of you have heard tonight and have all known, we're going through a pandemic that has devastated the country and our society in Rhode Island, and that has highlighted and magnified the inequality that exists. And the last thing we really need is people to be worrying about how are they going to heat their homes and keep the lights on. I think among housing and hunger, utilities are one of the top issues that we hear about, and people are just trying to, like I said, keep the lights on. So I think I'll end with who we are a little bit. The Interfaith Coalition is a coalition of faith leaders. We represent over 80 different institutions of faith, advocacy groups, community groups that have come together to really support those in need and the vulnerable communities, and making sure that you can pay your utilities is something that we all believe should not be a privilege, but should be a right. So I plead with you to pass this and to end to ban utility shutoffs for right now, and work with the community to make sure that people are protected. So thank you very much for your time and for having me tonight, and I hope you all have a blessed evening.
You too, and thank you very much for your testimony. Are there any questions for the witness? Seeing none, thank you. Next up, we have Gregory Waksmalski. Gregory, you may proceed with your testimony.
Okay, thank you very much for calling me. Did you need any other information for me, or I can just get started?
No, you may go ahead. You're live.
Thank you so much. First of all, I just want to extend my gratitude to absolutely everybody who showed up tonight from the communities to testify, whether they're restaurateurs, whether they're from the hotel lobby industry, the hospitality lobby industry, or citizens who came out tonight in support of some really great policy and opportunities to expand in Rhode Island our sense of justice as we all work to save lives during this pandemic. I also want to extend, of course, all of my gratitude to absolutely everybody on the House Committee for Corporations. You all are really at the front lines of some really tricky legislation in this session. And, we're all really, really glad that you're out here being the representation that we all need. And that, we know that you have some decisions to make tonight and going forward through the rest of this session. We've heard a lot of views, arguments, and testimony on House Bill 5442, as well as other bills that we've heard tonight that really do have the best interest of all people in mind when we're talking about how to keep things under control financially, fiscally, economically, while we deal with the public health pandemic. I want to call out by name and say thank you to Representative Fenton Fung. Thank you to Representative Chippendale. Thank you to Representative Morgan. We really appreciate your strong leadership, and we know that when you're talking about restaurateurs being shielded from pernicious bills and other ramifications in the utilities, we know that you're also thinking of all of the regular old human beings that might not own a restaurant, but certainly do face the same kind of strife, trials, and tribulations. In a day and age when a very small microscopic disease can lay waste to not only human lives, but also seems sometimes the entire economy, we really appreciate you all thinking of the least among us, the most vulnerable in our society. And you remember, when you're thinking about what to do next with this bill in committee, who would Jesus turn the utilities off for? Thank you again for your time. Before I relinquish my time to the committee, I do just want to call out that we are all on borrowed, stolen land. It was the Narragansett, the Wampanoag, the Pokanoket peoples that we encountered first, the Anglo-Europeans, only a handful of centuries ago. And their time here on this continent predated that by millennia. So I just want to give a land tribute before I get off the phone for everybody tonight. Thank you so much again for hearing me and doing the right thing. Be brave. Ban utility shutoffs. Pass House Bill 5442 onto the floor for a full vote so that we can have a more equitable, just, and safe state. Thank you again for your service.
Gregory, thank you very much for your testimony, and I want to thank everyone that's been very patient waiting to testify on these bills. We had a lot of bills today, and I apologize that these went a little bit longer and you guys all had to wait longer to testify, but thank you for being patient and appreciate your testimony.
Hey, glad to help democracy. Really do. And thank you again to all of you.
Absolutely. Next, are there any questions for the witness? Seeing none, thank you. Next up, we have Peter Nightingale. Peter, you are on the line and you're live before the House Committee on Corporations. You may proceed.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you very much. I am going to testify on behalf of the coordinating committee of the Poor People's Campaign in Rhode Island. And I would like to let you know that we support the bill. That is the bill that will prevent people from having their utilities shut off during the pandemic and 90 days after that. Utilities, we all know, are a matter of life and death, and the COVID pandemic has ravaged the economy. It has put people out of jobs, and they are facing terrible consequences. There is a very sad statistics about the United States, which is that 250,000 people in the U.S. every year die as a consequence of poverty. And of course, having your utilities shut off is one of the effects that one sees in that statistic. Rhode Island is smaller than the United States, but there are lots of people who have that happen to them here also. So I would also like to mention that the Poor People's Campaign has collected a lot of statistics about Rhode Island in particular, and it turns out that about 36% of the people in Rhode Island are poor or low income. So this is a very serious problem for anybody who lives on that margin. And let me be short and just reiterate our support for this bill, that is for the coordinating committee of the Poor People's Campaign in Rhode Island. And I hope that you will realize that this indeed is a matter of life and death. About myself personally, I may add, I'm a professor of physics at the University of Rhode Island, and I live in Rhode Island, but that compared to everything else is a detail. That basically is my testimony. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Professor. Are there any questions for the witness? Seeing none, thank you. Next up, we will go to Jennifer Wood. Jennifer, you may proceed.
Thank you. Good evening, Chairman and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify in support of House 5442. My name is Jennifer Wood, and I'm the director at the Rhode Island Center for Justice, and we represent consumers, and particularly low-income consumers, in matters before the PUC and do a lot of work relating to utility rights of Rhode Islanders. I just wanted to briefly highlight a couple of points this evening. I submitted some written testimony and won't repeat that. Obviously want to endorse the testimony and thank the sponsor for this important legislation. But going directly to the point of why is a moratorium imposed by the legislature needed at this time, I wanted to review the fact that in March, the PUC used its emergency powers to impose a moratorium on utility shutoffs for water, sewer, gas, and electric for all providers in the state of Rhode Island. But in July, that moratorium was lifted, and at this time, Rhode Islanders have no protection from utility shutoffs for water and sewer, and only those who are served by National Grid have protection for gas and electric service, and that's only for low-income consumers. While low-income consumers are a critical concern, obviously, during this pandemic, low-income consumers are very narrowly defined within the PUC structure, and that is limited to those who are eligible for government benefits like Medicaid or heating assistance. So there are thousands of Rhode Islanders who have become newly unemployed, newly income insecure, and maybe housing insecure, who would not be necessarily covered under the existing protection, which is the PUC's emergency order that extends only for that narrow group through April of this coming year, the year that we're in, rather. So this legislation provides a permanent solution for any state of emergency, whether it's the one we're in now or any future similar state of emergency, which is a really important thing to have in place so that the breadth of this protection can be automatic rather than rely upon emergency action taken by the PUC at a future time. I also just wanted to highlight that this pandemic has really elevated the importance for health and safety of having heat, hot water for hygiene, and very particularly access to education for public school students. I don't think most of us appreciated how critical reliable utilities would be in order to defend children's educational rights until this pandemic. So I think the need for the moratorium through legislation is clearly there, and including the continuation for at least 90 days after the conclusion of the governor's declared state of emergency. Thank you so much for the opportunity to testify in support of this important legislation, and of course I would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for your testimony. Are there any questions for the witness? Hearing none. Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you very much.
Next up, we have Alicia Ross. You are before the House Committee on Corporations. You may proceed with your testimony.
Hi, my name is Alicia Ross, and I am a community organizer at the George Wiley Center, where we help people in the community with social and economic justice grassroots organizing. My testimony about PIP, the percentage income payment plan, which will help lower, the utility rates by 2 to 4% on low-income Rhode Islanders. This will help a lot, especially during the moratorium and how we, it's a rough time out there. And I can testify for myself. There's a lot of people out there that cannot afford their utility bill. Last year they upped the rates twice and within a couple of months, and knowing that it was the pandemic. So I just feel that once this bill is passed, and I think everyone in Rhode Island will benefit out of it. That's my testimony.
Thank you so much for your testimony, and thank you for your patience tonight, waiting to testify. I really appreciate it. Are there any questions for the witness? Seeing none, Thank you very much for your testimony. Last up, we have Randall Rose. Randall, you may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. I, too, am in support of the bill. I would like to point out that the pandemic has hit Rhode Islanders hard. Even now, in 2021, our unemployment rate in Rhode Island is more than double what it was before the pandemic. And that unemployment rate has been increasing for the last couple months. So by no means are we over this. When people are unemployed and they obviously it's going to be hard for them to pay their utility bills. They may have more pressing bills to pay than they may not just have no way to pay their utility bills at all. So it is very important to pass a bill like this, given the continuing damage in terms of unemployment and that the pandemic has done, and the other kinds of damage that has happened as a result of the pandemic. I do want to suggest one change to the bill. This is on page 1, line 9 and 10, which says that currently the bill says that there can be no utility shutoffs during the period of any declared emergency by the governor. And the bill allows shutoffs to resume for certain kinds of emergencies the day after the governor declares the emergency over. That's not for all types of emergencies, but the bill says for some types of emergencies, shutoffs can resume the day that the governor declares the emergency over or the day after. And I just want to point out, nobody can know in advance when the governor is going to declare the emergency over. So for a lot of people who are relying on the protections against shutoffs, they may not find out that the emergency is declared over until the next day. They may not be able to make payment immediately. So I just would like to suggest adding a little bit of a grace period, perhaps the 90 days that's used elsewhere in the bill. This is on line 9 and 10 of page 1. I suggest a grace period of maybe 90 days after the governor declares the emergency over, or at least long enough for people to get a couple pay periods under their belt. So that's the only change I would suggest, but aside from that, I think it's a good bill. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Are there any questions for the witness? Hearing none, thank you. That concludes the verbal portion of the testimony on this bill. We did receive written testimony in favor from Mel Bynum, Maria Carr, Ben Roth, Jackie Goldman, Jordan Goyatt, Todd Lee, Brooke Conley, Jack Lancelota, Kevin Essington, Aaron Isaac, Economic Progress Institute, and Dutruv Gaura, all in favor. And then we did receive written testimony against from Michael Ryan from National Grid. And that concludes the hearing on 5442.